In the meantime, though, I'm Andrew Kraft. We're going to keep this shot up, but we got to bring into the conversation my colleague, Christina Evans, here in the LiveNOW newsroom, who has been covering this case from start to finish, and our friend legal analyst, Tre Lovell, who joins me. You guys, what a moment there in court today. And like I said, I've never seen anything like it. Christina, I'm going to start with you because you've been following this for so long here. Walk us through how we got to this moment today.
Well, Andrew, it's very interesting because this case has been marred with so many different issues coming there out of the courtroom, especially as it pertains to initially even the jury selection process was rounded. They were asking questions in court like, if Rihanna is to appear or if her name is to be brought up, will you be biased in this situation? So that started making headlines from there. 7 women and 5 men ultimately making this unanimous decision there after deliberating for only about 3 hours. This was a 3-week-long trial, so a lot of folks were thinking this might go the other way. In fact, the reason that is because ahead of jury selection in this case, there, ASAP Rocky turned down a plea deal. It was offered to him by those prosecutors, but the rapper's lead attorney, Joe Tacopina, did say that they didn't want it because he is innocent. That plea deal included a 180-day term in jail, and it was shocking for so many folks there that he didn't take that, especially after the evidence started coming out there in court. I might now want to throw it to Tre Lovell there, the legal analyst. It was interesting, again, with the jury selection process, all of the counts that they were focusing on, but specifically, they had to figure out whether or not they believed the defense's argument, whether or not it was a prop gun or a real gun.
Yeah, that's really what it came down to. And the prosecution's burden just really was never satisfied in this case. The case was really rife with reasonable doubt. The prosecution had to prove that it was a real gun that was fired real bullets. However, the gun was never produced. They had witnesses that said A$AP Rocky carried a prop gun and that didn't fire real bullets. When police did an investigation, they couldn't find any casings or any evidence that a real gun had been fired. And then, of course, the delay that the accuser took in terms of going to the police to report the incident, going to seek medical attention. There were just a lot of factors here in the evidence that created a problem to establish him beyond a reasonable doubt.
So, Tre, I have a couple of questions for you. And Christina, that was such a great kind of roundup of the timeline of how we got here. But I would imagine when criminal defense attorneys take a bet to decline a plea deal because the attorney and the defendant both believe in their bones that they're innocent, that's a big bet to take. It paid off here, did it not?
Yes, it certainly paid off here. And you're right. When you're rejecting a plea deal, especially a reasonable one, it's either you really believe in your case and you're not guilty, and you don't believe that you should be serving any time whatsoever. But it is a risk because you never know how 12 jurors are going to respond. You never know how the evidence is going to ultimately be assimilated. But by rejecting the plea deal, they obviously were very positive that they could win the case, prevent the prosecution from fulfilling their burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt, and it paid off here.
And Tre, I want to talk about that evidence as well, but also just the contentiousness that was happening there in the courtroom. In fact, on Friday, we played out the full 8 minutes as well here on LiveNOW, but we saw the defense attorney, the prosecution, and the judge going back and forth over issues of perjury. Again, the defense accused the prosecution of perjury in that case, and they said it wasn't the case in that way, and they were offended and saying they're going to put it all out on the table. So as far as the contentiousness that happened there in court, is that common to see these sort of things unfolding between those? Tre, are you able to hear us?
Tre, do you have us here?
Now I do. I'm sorry. I lost the sound for a moment.
Oh, no worries. Christina, with your question?
I was just asking because, again, on court there Friday, we saw the contentiousness between the judge, the defense attorney, and the prosecution all going back and forth over this issue of perjury. It seemed like there could even be a mistrial because of this when I was talking to legal affairs journalist Megan Cuniff, who was in the courtroom. What are your thoughts on this? When it comes to there being issues of perjury, is there any way for this to move forward after? Does the DA's office have an opportunity to try to see if there's something that was in as far as how they acted in court that wasn't proper?
Well, they certainly can pursue any claims of perjury that believe that happened, but that's going to be secondary to what the jury verdict is. You got to remember, the jurors are there to decide the truth, and whether or not a witness is telling the truth is really up to the jury to decide. And so, in terms of perjury and accusations like that, listen, that's part of a very contentious case, which this obviously was. There's a lot of emotions going back and forth, a lot of claims, certainly by the attorneys as well. But ultimately, when you give it to the jury and they take what was heard with respect to the testimony and they base their credibility on one side or the other, it's hard to detract from that. So I think once that happened, it kind of, usurped whatever claims of perjury that were made at the time.
So, Trey, I just have to ask, because it's important, I was kind of alluding to this while we were waiting for the verdict to be read. The rapidity with which a jury reaches a verdict, this was mere hours. They just started deliberations this morning. If you're the defense, if you're the prosecution, and you get the update from the jury foreperson that a verdict has already been reached, what goes through your mind if you're the defense, if you're the prosecution here, about how the rest of the day will go for your case here?
So when you have a case like this that is a he said, she said case, this is a pure credibility case. Depending on who you believe, that's where the case is going to go. And when you have a lot of testimony that contradicts what the prosecution is trying to say, that shows there could be certain doubts, that the case is not super tight, when you have a short verdict time, the defense is usually happy. That means that they quickly realize that the burden's not going to be fulfilled. There were a lot of freckles of doubt in this. Thus, they didn't need to deliberate a long time. That happens when you have short deliberations, you have a he said, she said case, and you have a lot of questions about whether or not the prosecution is fulfilling their burden. So in this case, when there was a short time, only 3 hours, the defense was very happy.
So if you're just joining us here, we're a little past the top of the hour. It's a little after 5 o'clock there in Los Angeles. You see there a throng of reporters have gathered outside the courthouse in Los Angeles after we just found that A$AP Rocky, the fashion maven, the hip-hop star, the celebrity, is now not guilty on these 2 felony charges there in Los Angeles, and we've been following this case throughout the very beginning. I'm trying to see if we can see our colleague and our friend there, legal affairs journalist Megan Cuniff. She's been inside the court throughout the duration of this. Trey, I got to ask now, what happens? I mean, we'll wait and see whether or not the prosecution or the defense steps up to that mic stand here. But is there any recourse, any remedy for the plaintiff, A$AP Relli, for his team? Can they do anything going forward? They can't file an appeal, right?
No, they can't file an appeal. Double jeopardy attaches when you have a jury verdict.
Sure.
So it can be no re-prosecution. Very limited grounds to appeal for the prosecution. So in essence, the criminal side of this is over. However, there is the civil case going on, and that's going to be separate, with a separate burden of proof, a lighter burden of proof, and that's about the money. So I think, the greater worry of the criminal side is over, but the civil side will continue.
And when you're talking about the civil side, it was also brought up in court. This was the argument by the defense as well, that A$AP Relli was trying to extort A$AP Rocky. They had recordings that were brought up in court, also several text messages showing the two talking back and forth, both before the meetup and then afterwards. Seeming like, again, this is what the defense said in court, that A$AP Relli was trying to get Rocky to admit to firing at him with a real gun mere hours after the alleged incident happened there in Los Angeles. So as far as his claim there for civil court, he can still pursue it on that side. What would be the path that he would take in order to get some sort of civil litigation going?
Yeah, so he basically has to prove his case, more likely than not, that a real gun was used to shoot at him. It's a lower standard of proof. But once again, it's going to be a credibility contest. It's going to be a he said, in terms of and who the jury is going to believe. Statements like that he was really just about the money and want to do a settlement, that can hurt him, even in a civil case. It can show bias. It can show a motive to not necessarily tell the truth, but just get a certain result. So that certainly will be used in the civil case. You need to remember, a lot of times it happens where in the criminal proceedings, there's a not guilty, but turn around and there's a liability verdict in the civil case. For example, O.J. Simpson. Yeah. And so it doesn't mean that the civil case is going to be unsuccessful necessarily. But it's going to be a retrial of that. The nice thing is the civil attorneys get to look at what happened in the criminal side, learn from it, better produce the evidence, better prepare a case. So they do have an advantage in the civil case.
Yeah, but I was going to ask, as decisive as this seems today, unanimous jury verdict, they didn't deliberate for very long here. Do the civil claims and will they hold up because of the facts of this case? He was found not guilty. That's a lot of eggs to put in a basket of a civil lawsuit, isn't it not?
It is. And one thing you need to realize also is that Rocky was not required to testify in this case. He had the right not to testify. He will have to testify in the civil case. You do not have a Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself in civil proceedings. So he will be deposed. He will be forced to answer questions, which could make a difference. Because when a jury is seeing how his deposition testimony is, how he testifies in court, the credibility often it could go the other way. So that is a big difference in terms of what could happen in the civil case.
And Tre, I want to put up this tweet, if our producers can do so, from Megan Cuniff. It shows one of those that were there, those photos that were shown in court. So this was shown, it was swapped in on Friday after the defense objected to the first photo of the alleged wounds there that came from this gun firing. This is what A$AP Relli is saying happened to him after A$AP Rocky allegedly shot him. But this photo was shown to the jury. At the time, this wasn't admitted into evidence initially. So when it comes to now preparing for if there is a civil trial, do the same steps go into that as far as preparing the case, as far as letting the defense then know and have an option to see everything? Because it was interesting to me that this even was able to go forward with the jury able to see some evidence that wasn't even admitted formally into court.
Yeah, so in a civil case, transparency is everything. It is required, it is protected, it is mandatory. And there are even instructions that if you don't produce evidence during the discovery phase, you cannot produce it at trial. So civil judges will not allow surprises, certainly with the evidence, and when there's an opportunity to produce and receive evidence. In the civil case, it will be very transparent. Everything will be produced that wants to be used at trial, so there'll be no surprise.
Oh, it looks like there is Rihanna there. It was remained to be seen whether or not she was on hand for this, and she is there. Andrew Kraft back here. That was a lot, but we found the shot for you. That's what we do here. It was on delay. It was just mere seconds behind. But we wanted to let you listen. That was Joe Tacopina, A$AP Rocky's criminal defense attorney, and his team, who successfully defended their client after Rocky got off on these not guilty verdicts from a jury in a unanimous decision here. We're going to keep this shot. Christina Evans, my colleague, still joining me in the LiveNOW newsroom. Also, Tre Lovell on the line. This was a victory lap, Tre, for Joe Tacopina, for A$AP Rocky. A$AP Rocky saying he is pleased, he is happy, he is relieved that he is a free man still. And Tacopina taking this victory lap here, kind of extolling his team, saying that he and Rocky have become almost best friends in this process. And now it looks all said and done here. A$AP Rocky and Rihanna there now in their kind of caravan of black SUVs. Tacopina may be coming back to speak a little bit more. We'll see whether or not that happens here. But to my previous question, Tre, just react to what you just saw. That was a melee there, but you could feel the overwhelming sense of relief among Rocky, among Tacopina, and all the paparazzi, all the fans who gathered there for that moment. Just your reaction, Tre.
You know, it's hard to understand the incredible stress that ASAP Rocky was going through during this case. The threat of having to go to jail. I mean, he's in the middle of being a very successful performer. And for that to stop and the threat of incarceration and a guilty verdict. I mean, there's a lot of stress. So I'm never surprised when I see, you know, the jury say not guilty and exhilaration from the lawyers and the defendant, like he did in this case where he launched into the crowd where his family was. That's just not surprising. We as viewers watch this with interest, and we understand, oh God, it would be horrible, you know, to be found guilty. But you know, if you're there and that's the threat, and you're facing 24 potential years, it's an incredible feeling of exhilaration when you're found exonerated and you're found not guilty. This wasn't even a hung verdict. This was a not guilty verdict. And one other thing to point out is he didn't take the stand. And had he been forced to take the stand, had his team felt that he needed to get his side up there, all of that testimony could have been used in his civil trial. So now he saved himself from having to make any admissions or any testimony, and that's going to help him in the civil side.
All right, so an ebullient there, Joe Tacopina, taking questions from everyone. Every reporter gathered there about this case, the contours of the case, the highlights, the key moments. And so you heard it there live. That's what we do here on Live Now from Fox. ASAP Rocky found not guilty on these 2 felony counts. You saw him there. You heard him there. He was with his partner, Rihanna, and they got into their caravan and are on their way as a free couple and as a free man there. We do want to bring into conversation just briefly to kind of wrap up some of this coverage, and then we are going to play the very brief moments when the verdict was read in court here. Christina Evans live in the Live Now newsroom, my colleague, and Tre Lovell, legal analyst. Christina, final thoughts here.
I think final thoughts just have everything to do with what he was talking about in that press conference. He's challenging the DA now to bring charges, he says, of perjury there and of extortion for ASAP Relli. Of course, he was the alleged victim in this case and the main witness that was put on the stand. Tre, do you think that it's possible that the DA will bite at that and actually bring those charges against ASAP Relli?
Good question, because it can kind of be for or against them. You know, most prosecutors, if they lose a case and there's claims of perjury, they feel it's part of their fault, that they entrusted a witness, they put a witness for the jury, and they were surprised, they didn't tell the truth. Most prosecutors think they should vet that out. And to then turn around and go after them for perjury kind of shows a shortcoming for the prosecutor. So a lot of times they'll resist that. On the flip side, it's a way for the prosecutor to get vindication and said, hey, you know, we had a good case. Had we believed the witness, it was because the witness perjured himself. You know, we therefore are going to go after him. And it kind of vindicates the prosecutor saying, hey, it's not really my fault. It's the witness's fault for lying to us and to you. So it can kind of go either way. My thought is they probably won't pursue perjury. Probably just let it go.
We'll leave it at that. Tre Lovell, Christina Evans, thanks so much for telling this story alongside so many of our viewers. And we'll be touching on this, I would imagine, with Christina a little bit later on in our coverage on this very busy Tuesday. And we'll check in soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.